Have you ever stopped to think, in a quiet moment, about the true weight of existence? About what it truly means to bring a new consciousness into this complex and at times painful world? There is a phrase, a cutting idea from the philosopher David Benatar, that echoes like thunder amidst the silence of our certainties. Bringing someone into the world is a cruel act. Harsh words, aren't they? Perhaps uncomfortable. But what if this discomfort is the first step towards an emotional liberation? You didn't even know you needed. What if, by confronting this perspective, we can find a new level of self-knowledge and inner peace? In this encounter, we will not seek easy answers, nor absolute truths. We will dive together into the depths of this statement, exploring the pain, the reflection, and surprisingly the wisdom that can emerge when we dare to question the very foundations of our own existence. If you feel the call for an honest conversation, for a courageous look at life and its shadows, you are in the right place. This is an invitation to awaken. Before we continue this journey, allow me a small reminder. Knowledge and reflection are treasures that multiply when shared. Check if you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of our future explorations in search of a more conscious and authentic life. Chapter 1. The Inescapable Shadow of Suffering. Deciphering Benatar's asymmetry argument. To understand the force behind Benatar's assertion, we need to delve into his central argument, known as the asymmetry between pleasure and pain. Does it sound complex? Allow me to simplify, for the beauty of philosophy often lies in its ability to illuminate the deepest truths with clarity. Benatar invites us to consider the following. The absence of pain, for one who does not exist, is good. If a person is never born, they do not experience hunger, illness, loss, anguish. This absence of suffering is undeniably a positive state, or at least not a negative one. On the other hand, the absence of pleasure for one who does not exist is not bad. A person who never came to be does not miss the pleasures of life, for there is no them to feel that lack. Now let's consider one who exists. The presence of pain for one who lives is bad. All of us, to a greater or lesser extent, experience suffering. It is an intrinsic part of the human condition. The presence of pleasure, in turn, is good. We seek joy, love, satisfaction. Wherein lies Benatar's cruelty in the comparison? By bringing someone into existence, we guarantee that this person will experience pain. However, by not bringing them into existence, we do not deprive them of any pleasure in a relevant way, as there would be no subject to be deprived. Thus, in Benatar's balance, non-existence always comes out innovazione, as it avoids all harm without causing any real deprivation of good. It's a logic that may seem cold, almost mathematical, but it touches an exposed nerve of our experience. How many times in moments of deep anguish have we not wondered about the purpose of so much suffering? How many times have we not looked at the world and seen an ocean of pains, large and small, that seem to drown the islands of happiness? The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, long before Benatar, already painted existence with pessimistic tones, arguing that life is a pendulum manus between pain and boredom. For him, suffering was the rule, and moments of happiness mere temporary interruptions of that norm. Benatar radicalizes this perspective, giving it a logical basis that questions not only the quality of life, but the very act of initiating it. This is not about denying the moments of joy, love, or deep connection that life offers us. Benatar acknowledges these pleasures. The central question for him is whether these pleasures can, in fact, compensate for the inevitable sufferings, and more crucially, whether we have the right to impose this gamble on a new being without their consent. It is a thought that challenges us to look beyond our own experiences and consider existence from a more universal and perhaps more honest perspective on its intrinsically risky nature. If this initial exploration has already struck a sensitive chord in you, if it has awakened a new angle of reflection, how about leaving your like? It's a silent way of saying that this conversation matters and that we are together in this search for understanding. Chapter 2. Voices of Disillusionment. Why do so many resonate with the idea of a world too imperfect? David Benatar's philosophy, though it may sound radical or excessively pessimistic to many, does not arise in a vacuum. It finds a surprisingly strong echo in hearts and minds that through different paths have reached a similar perception of the fundamental imperfection of the world and the human condition. Why is it that this voice of disillusionment finds such resonance? Let's think about our own lives. Since childhood, we are confronted with fragility, the pain of a scraped knee, the sadness of a broken friendship, the anxiety before the unknown. We grow, and the pains become more complex. The loss of loved ones, romantic disappointment, the burden of responsibilities, the illnesses that afflict us or those we love, the constant struggle for security and meaning in a world that often seems indifferent to our deepest longings. Let's look around us. We see wars that claim innocent lives, famines that devastate entire populations, social injustices that cry out to the heavens. We see the destruction of nature, cruelty to animals, the greed that seems to move so many gears of the system. Even in the most privileged societies, anxiety, depression, and a sense of emptiness are silent epidemics. How can one not feel, on some level, a pang of disillusionment? Carl Jung himself, the Swiss psychiatrist and psychotherapist who founded analytical psychology, spoke of the shadow, that part of us and society that contains everything we repress, deny, or consider unacceptable. Confronting the shadow is painful, but essential for growth. Benatar's philosophy, in a way, forces us to confront the shadow of existence itself, to recognize that along with all the light and beauty, there is an intrinsic darkness, a potential for suffering that cannot be ignored. This is not about intellectual masochism or a desire to wallow in negativity. It is about honesty. Many people feel that the prevailing cultural narratives, those that sell us the idea of constant happiness, guaranteed success, a life without major setbacks, are fundamentally false. They create unreal pressure and make us feel inadequate when our experiences do not match this fabricated ideal. The resonance with ideas like Benatar's may come from a weariness of this superficiality. It may be a yearning to acknowledge the totality of human experience, including its darkest and most painful facets. It is as if, by admitting the fundamental cruelty pointed out by the philosopher, we could paradoxically feel more relieved, more authentic, relieved from the pressure of having to pretend that everything is always fine. This disillusionment is not necessarily the end of the line. For many, it is the beginning of a deeper search, a search for meaning that does not depend on a perfect world, but that can be built precisely from the recognition of its imperfections. It is a call to look inward, to question, to find more resilient and compassionate ways to navigate the journey of life. Chapter 3. The lump in the throat of conscience, the moral weight of creation and existential responsibility. When the idea that bringing someone into the world is a cruel act begins to settle in our minds, it inevitably leads us to even more delicate terrain, that of moral responsibility. If existence is, as Benatar argues, an imposition of suffering, what is the ethical weight that falls, candidatos, the shoulders, of those who make the decision to create a new life? This is not a question to generate guilt, but to invite deep and at times uncomfortable reflection. Most people who decide to have children do so out of love, a genuine desire to nurture, to share life, to perpetuate the family or species. These are noble and profoundly human motivations. However, Benatar's philosophy challenges us to look beyond intentions and consider the inevitable consequences. Let's think about the concept of consent. In almost every other area of life, imposing something significant on someone without their consent is considered morally problematic. A new being, by definition, cannot consent to be born. They are brought into existence and, with it, into a package that includes not only potential joys but certain sufferings, illnesses, losses, fears, mortality itself. Do we have the right to make this gamble on behalf of another? The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre stated that we are condemned to be free, meaning that we are radically responsible for our choices and for who we become. This responsibility extends to our most fundamental decisions, and few are as fundamental as that of creating a new conscious being. Bringing someone into the world is not just a biological act. It is an act with profound existential implications for the being who is created. Schopenhauer again offers a bleak but thought-provoking perspective. He saw the will to live, a blind, irrational impulse, as the driving force behind procreation, a force that perpetuates the cycle of suffering. For him, a more compassionate and rational view would lead to the conclusion that refraining from creating more suffering would be the most ethical act. Of course, this is a view that clashes head-on with many of our most basic instincts and with cultural and social pressures that often celebrate procreation as an unquestionable good, a duty, or a supreme achievement. But philosophy invites us precisely to question the unquestionable, to examine the foundations of our most ingrained beliefs. This reflection need not lead to a simplistic judgment. It can instead lead to greater awareness. If we decide to bring children into the world, let us do so with full awareness of the seriousness of this act, with a redoubled commitment to minimize suffering and maximize the well-being of that new being, knowing that, even so, we cannot protect them from all of life's pains. And if we choose not to procreate, let that decision also be respected as an ethical and conscious choice, possibly informed by a deep empathy for the human condition. The lump in the throat of conscience arises when we realize there are no easy answers. But it is precisely in this space of questioning, of brutal honesty with oneself, that the possibility of an ethical awakening resides. This is a point that, I imagine, can generate many different reflections and feelings. What is your perspective on this moral responsibility? Had you ever thought about creation through this lens? Share your reflections in the comments. This is a safe space to explore these complex issues together. Chapter 4. Between Revolt and Acceptance. Finding meaning, even in the face of life's cruelty. Confronting the idea that existence itself carries an intrinsic dose of cruelty, as Benatar suggests, can throw us into an emotional whirlwind. The first reaction might be denial, anger, or even a deep sadness and revolt against this apparent cosmic trap. If life is like this, what's the point of it all? A question that can echo in our darkest moments. However, the history of philosophy and human experience itself shows us that it is precisely in confronting the most difficult truths that we can find unexpected paths to meaning and acceptance. Not a passive, resigned acceptance, but an active, conscious acceptance that allows us to navigate life with more wisdom and courage. Let's think of the Stoics, philosophers. Like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, they lived in turbulent times, filled with uncertainty, loss, and injustice, not much different in essence from the pains that still afflict us today. Their philosophy did not deny suffering. On the contrary, it started from the recognition of its inevitability. The secret for them was not in avoiding suffering at all costs, an impossible goal, but in cultivating our inner attitude towards it. It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things, taught Epictetus. This perspective offers us a powerful tool. Even if we accept Benatar's premise about the inherent negativity of being born, we still have the ability to choose how to respond to this reality in our own lives. We can focus on what is within our control, our thoughts, our actions, our values. We can find purpose not in denying the harshness of life, but in facing it with virtue, with courage, with compassion for ourselves and others. Another philosophical current that offers us light is existentialism, particularly in the figures of Albert Camus and Viktor Frankl. Camus, in The Myth of Sisyphus, compares the human condition to the punishment of the Greek hero condemned to eternally push a rock uphill, only to watch it roll down again. It seems like a portrayal of absurdity, of futility. But Camus concludes, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. How? By embracing revolt, freedom, and passion, even in the face of the absurd. By finding meaning in the struggle itself, in the awareness of one's own condition. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, developed logotherapy, an approach centered on the search for meaning. Having witnessed the most extreme suffering, Frankl concluded that even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, man can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom, of mental independence. He stated that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Meaning can be found in love, in meaningful work, or even in the attitude we take towards inevitable suffering. Thus, the cruelty of existence, paradoxically, can become a catalyst for a deeper and more meaningful life. By abandoning the illusion of a perfect world or uninterrupted happiness, we can open ourselves to appreciating moments of beauty and joy with more intensity. precisely because of their transience and contrast with the shadows. We can be driven to create our own meaning, instead of waiting for it to be given to us from the outside. The journey between initial revolt and mature acceptance is arduous, personal and unique for each individual, but it is a journey that humanizes and strengthens us. Chapter 5. The courage to be despite everything. Resilience, compassion, and the pursuit of authenticity in a painful world. If existence presents us with a challenging scenario, as described by Benatar, and if we find in philosophies like Stoicism and existentialism a call to find meaning despite it, the practical question becomes how to live, how to cultivate the inner strength necessary not only to endure but to flourish amidst the inevitable pains and imperfections. Here the key word is courage, not the absence of fear, but action despite fear. The courage to be, to assert oneself, to seek an authentic life, even when the weight of existential awareness seems overwhelming. And this courage manifests in very concrete ways in our daily lives through the cultivation of resilience, compassion, and authenticity. Resilience is our ability to recover from adversity, to learn from falls, and to move forward, perhaps not unscathed, but strengthened. Like bamboo that bends in a strong wind but does not break, resilience allows us to weather life's storms. It is not an innate trait reserved for a fortunate few, but a skill that can be developed. Practices like mindfulness, which teaches us to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment, can help us create a space between the painful stimulus and our reaction to it. Learning to focus on the present, rather than ruminating on the past or fearing the future, is also crucial. Compassion, starting with self-compassion, is another fundamental pillar. If life is inherently difficult, why add to this difficulty severe self-criticism and relentless judgment? Psychologist Kristin Neff, a leading researcher on self-compassion, teaches us that treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would offer a good friend in suffering is not a sign of weakness, but of profound emotional wisdom. And this compassion, once cultivated internally, naturally overflows to others. Recognizing that we are all in the same boat, facing our own battles, lessens isolation and strengthens human bonds, which are a vital source of solace and strength. Finally, the pursuit of authenticity. In a world that often pressures us to follow predefined scripts, the audacity to listen to our inner voice and live according to our deepest values is a revolutionary act. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are. This involves confronting our shadows, integrating the various parts of ourselves, and having the courage to deviate from others' expectations to tread our own path. Living authentically, even if it means accepting our vulnerability and imperfection, connects us with a sense of purpose and vitality that no external conformity can offer. These are not magic recipes, but an invitation to continuous inner work that requires honesty, patience, and above all, an immense dose of love for oneself and for the journey itself, with all its lights and shadows. If this conversation about courage, resilience, and authenticity resonates with your heart and your search for a fuller life even in the face of challenges, show your support with a like. It's a gesture that connects us and impels us to continue exploring these paths of transformation. Chapter 6. Freeing oneself from the burden of imposed existence. Finding peace in impermanence and self-knowledge. We have reached a crucial point in our journey. We have confronted Benatar's harsh philosophy, explored its resonances, pondered moral responsibility, sought meaning in acceptance and courage to live authentically. Now how can we, in fact, free ourselves from the burden of an existence that, according to this view, was imposed upon us, and find lasting inner peace? Paradoxically, accepting this challenging perspective can itself be a path to liberation. When we stop fighting against the fundamental nature of reality, when we stop demanding that life be something it is not, that is, free from suffering and imperfection, a different kind of peace can emerge. It is the peace that comes not from denial, but from deep understanding. Self-knowledge here is the master key. Delving into who we are, understanding our pains, our fears, but also our strengths and our truest longings, allows us to navigate existence with more awareness and less reactivity. Philosophers like Socrates, with his famous Know Thyself, already pointed to this fundamental truth. By knowing ourselves deeply, we begin to untie the internal knots that bind us to unnecessary suffering, that which is created not by pain itself, but by our resistance to it, by our excessive identification with our thoughts and emotions. Another powerful concept that aids us in this search for peace is the understanding of impermanence. Many philosophical and spiritual traditions, such as Buddhism, emphasize that everything in life is transient. Joys come and go, sorrows come and go. Life itself is a constant flow of changes. Clinging to the idea of permanence in an impermanent world is a sure recipe for suffering. By accepting impermanence, we can learn to savor the good moments without desperately clinging to them, and to navigate difficult times with the awareness that this too shall pass. This acceptance of the flow of life frees us from the fear of loss and anxiety about the future. Surprisingly, reflecting on Benatar's philosophy, even if we do not fully adopt it, can lead us to a sharper appreciation of the present. If existence is so risky and potentially painful, then moments of genuine joy, connection, and beauty become even more precious. We begin to value the here and now more intensely as we recognize its fragility and intrinsic worth. Liberation, therefore, does not mean escaping life or denying its difficulties. It means finding a new way of being in life, more present, more conscious, more compassionate, and fundamentally, more at peace with the complex tapestry of human experience. It is finding freedom within the limits of our condition, not despite them. It is transforming the lead of existential pain into the gold of lived wisdom. This journey of self-knowledge and acceptance is, perhaps, the most important one we can undertake. How have you sought this inner peace in your own life? What practices or reflections have been most transformative for you? Feel free to share your experiences in the comments. Your journey can inspire and welcome many others who are on this same quest. Your voice is important to us. The legacy of an uncomfortable reflection, transforming the pain of awareness into wisdom for living. We have traveled an intense path together, haven't we? We started from a provocative statement, the idea that bringing someone into the world is a cruel act, and delved into the depths of what that means for our human experience, for our moral conscience, and for our search for meaning and peace. David Benatar's philosophy, with its relentless logic, certainly forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the inherent suffering in existence. And as we have seen, this is not a reflection to sink us into despair, but rather a powerful invitation to awaken. An awakening to a more examined, more conscious, more compassionate life. For by recognizing the shadows, we can value the light even more. By understanding the fragility of joy, we can savor it with more intensity. By accepting the imperfection of the world and ourselves, we can free ourselves from the tyranny of expectation and find genuine peace in authenticity. This type of reflection does not offer easy answers, but it presents us with something much more valuable, the opportunity to transform the pain of awareness into wisdom for living. A wisdom that teaches us to be kinder to ourselves and others, to cultivate resilience in the face of adversity, and to find our own purpose, even in a universe that at first glance may seem indifferent. May this journey serve as a beacon, illuminating not only the challenges, but also the immense possibilities for growth and transformation that reside within each of us. May we carry with us the courage to question, the strength to accept, and the wisdom to live each moment as fully as possible. The search for self-knowledge is an infinite path, and each step, each reflection brings us closer to a more authentic and serene version of ourselves. Continue this exploration. Continue seeking your truth, and so that you don't miss any of our future deep conversations, which always seek to offer an emotional safe harbor and keys to a new consciousness, I cordially invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Your presence in our community is what gives meaning to this work. Thank you for your company, and until our next meeting.